Tonight we have Paul Banco from the U.S. Geological Survey, who's going to give us a little bit of understanding about bird conservation biology, and we're looking forward to that.
I spent a little bit of time explaining how I got into wildlife biology. My dad, Winston Banco, he was assigned to Hawaii in 1965. His assignment in Hawaii was to figure out what is going on with these Hawaiian birds that seem to be going extinct at a great rate. So he spent a lot of time at the Bishop Museum, for example, looking at specimens, reading accounts, talking to whoever he could about Hawaiian birds, Hawaiian plants, and Hawaiian insects. And then it occurred to him, he was getting a little bit antsy because he'd come out as a wildlife biologist and he wanted to be in the field, not so much in the museum. And that led him to come up with an idea that, everybody knows what a crow is, or almost everybody does. So why don't I talk to the residents of the island about where are ʻAlalā, the Hawaiian crow? So that was kind of his first species to really focus on. And at the time, we didn't call it citizen science, but that's what it was.
Excuse me, Paul. What?
Yes.
When he started looking into ʻAlalā, what year was that?
Well, he started looking at ʻAlalā about 1969 is what I recall. And at that point, I was in college, so I wasn't close on his heels at that point. But when I graduated with my bachelor's in 1972, I joined him in the field. I came back to Hawaii without really any plan of my own for employment, but he needed help. At that time, his budget was really, really tiny. He didn't have an official vehicle or anything. It's just sort of bootstrap operation. So for room and board, I was his assistant for a while. And it was very gratifying for me. It was great to have him as my mentor. But anyway, his modus operandi was to contact anybody who would talk to him, landowners, ranchers, cowboys, hunters, basically anybody who would go into the forest or who had been in the forest, and ask him, what is your recollection of ʻAlalā when you were growing up? What is your recollection now? Where would you advise me to go to find them? And slowly this little network of information began to grow. And he met very helpful people. George and Martha Schattauer were particularly useful to him and very, very accommodating and helpful in pointing him here and there to talk to people about crows and find crows on his own. And so I joined him in that. And that's how I got the bug, the wildlife bug, is that, okay, we're going out, we're finding ʻAlalā, finding nests and, learning what we can about their behavior and distribution.
Can I interrupt you just for a second?
Yeah, of course.
What was in 1969 in that era, what was the population like of the ʻAlalā?
Yeah, well, that's the key issue we were going for. We knew of about 65 individuals at that time, and we knew there were some more, but they were just in places we couldn't easily get to. And, that's what people would say, well, I know of, maybe a couple of years ago I knew a pair that nested over here, and, if we could get access to that area, we'd go and check it out and find a nest or not. But at that time, it was very clear to us that things were unraveling for ʻAlalā. I mean, with 65 known birds and only relatively, maybe a dozen at most other birds that we never personally could account for, but we had some confidence they were there. We said, wow, this is pretty amazing. Here is a species of crow, which worldwide are relatively adaptable birds, and this is all we can account for. And so this was one of my early lessons in credibility, was that, that's what we observed firsthand and through the local experience of residents. And it was very, very hard for us to be believed, by official people, because it's like, you're just not looking hard enough. You got to go out and look. And we continue to look, but clearly the evidence bore us out, and within really just 10 or less years, it was clear to everybody that, oh, in fact, there are not very many ʻAlalā left. And also, if I can digress just a little bit, that era is when we started the captive breeding of ʻAlalā, or at least the captive population of ʻAlalā. And it was kind of by accident. There was no plan for a captive population. It was simply when my dad would go out, this was just before I joined him in the field. He went out I think it was, it was in 71, I think it was. And he found two young ʻAlalā perched on logs or, low down in the trees. And he walked right up to them, and they didn't move. And he thought, well, they must be sick or something. They don't look injured. And there was a nest nearby, so he knew that they had come from the nest. And so he decided, well, maybe what I need to do is I'll grab them, take them to a vet, see if there's anything wrong with them. And then, but once you take a young bird like that, it's not that easy to give it back to his parents. But he thought they were basically done for at that point, which they well may have been. And both of them had avian malaria, it turned out. One of them died not long after being taken into captivity. It was decided, since he had no means of keeping these birds or breeding them, he sent them back to the mainland at the request of his home office, where they had a very large captive breeding program for sandhill cranes and black-footed ferrets and that kind of thing back in Patuxent, Maryland. And so the first two ʻAlalā went back there simply because, well, there was no provision for them in captivity here. And then by the time I joined him, the next field season, we found 3 birds in the same kind of situation, 3 young birds in different areas, all on the Kona side. And they were perched, you just walk right up to them like I could walk right up to you. And it was very startling and, a little bit disturbing. So we took them into captivity as well, under the assumption that they were also sick with malaria. But these birds, they decided they really didn't have money back at Patuxent for an ʻAlalā program, and so they said, well, do what you can, figure out something there in Hawaii. And so it turned out that the National Park Service decided, well, because that's where my dad's office was. We were co-located there in the national park. Well, let's build some aviaries, and we'll see what happens. And at that point, the state then became quite interested in breeding them themselves. And so the birds were transferred to Pohakaloa. And you probably know the rest of the story. Then the flock was moved to Maui eventually. And now it's under management both on the Big Island and Maui. And there are, I forget the exact total. I think it's 112 birds in captivity, divided between the 2 islands. So the program has grown, but it's been quite slow to get there. So I'm sorry.
Can I ask you another? There are a lot of people that love the ʻAlalā.
Oh yeah.
And there's, this episode that we had recently, really pained many people actually.
Yeah.
And there's quite a bit of criticism about that you hear about that program. And it brings me to wonder, certain animals, at a certain point in their existence are going to need constant care.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like the ʻAlalā is one of those species that, really, if you want to perpetuate this species, you want to keep it around forever, it almost is going to have to be, like in an aviary or where the public can come and see them, number one, because when they go out into the wild, you're not going to find them, number one. You're a scientist, you know how to look for them, you can't find them. People aren't going to see them. But it's a way to keep these things going on. And I'm just wondering if that wouldn't be a better path for the success of this bird to, if you want to keep it around forever, because it's virtually extinct right now.
That's right. Well, it is extinct in the wild. And as I say, there's maybe 112 birds in captivity.
Yeah.
So, your point is well taken. And I think it hits on a real common issue, or a central issue in conservation biology, which a lot of conservation biology focuses on rare and endangered species. I mean, that's almost by definition, that's what it's about. It's not exclusively about the rare species, but it's largely and historically has been. And my dad's, his own professional history started with the trumpeter swan in southwestern Montana. So he knew all about working with very rare species, or at the time, the Alaska population wasn't well known, and it wasn't known how large it was. And it was just thought, at least in the contiguous 48 states, that
Well, they went from almost zero to like 13 or 14,000.
yeah, and his colleagues were working on whooping cranes, which were down to the, I forget now, the last dozen or even less. And he spent a very short period of time on the Desert Bighorn Game Range in Nevada. So, in his background, he was used to working with endangered species. And the common thread with endangered species work is they're endangered for a number of reasons, but one of the things that predisposes a species to becoming rare is that, one, they're not prolific breeders. I mean, their natural breeding system is kind of on the slow end of the scale compared to, let's say, rabbits or rats or, things that we recognize are kind of fast breeders. Many of them also are specialists, either in terms of what their habitat requirements are or their food requirements. Now, the ʻAlalā doesn't quite fit that mode. I wouldn't call it real specialized, and I wouldn't call it particularly slow breeder, but its social system is, I think, contributes a little bit to its rarity, because they're very they're an ohana bird. I mean, the basic social unit is the family. They don't occur, and of course, this, you have to understand, we don't know what they might have, how they might have behaved and occurred 200 years ago when there presumably were a lot. But by the time we caught up with them, it was clear that they were very family-oriented. The young stay with the parents for at least a year, kind of learning the ropes, but staying on the edge of the parents' territory, very deferential to the parents, don't get in the way, probably help with the upbringing of their younger siblings as they're produced year by year until they find their own territory and acquire a mate. And so, if you drive that kind of a population down to low levels, you may expect that it's going to take a long time for things to build up. But your point, I think, is well taken. A lot of these species are extremely slow in terms of our lifespan. And so it wouldn't surprise me at all that if we could fast forward the movie, we might say, the ʻAlalā finally starts to get going maybe in 50 or 60 years from now.
What do they eat?
Oh, well, they eat a lot of things.
I've never heard or saw any. What do these things? What did they eat way back?
Yeah.
When?
According to the old timers that wrote down the notes in the 1890s, they said iʻe fruit was number one. It wasn't the only thing, but iʻe was really important. But other things too. They're largely a fruit eater, but they rob bird nests. They take eggs, chicks of other bird species. They even take a little bit of nectar. They eat just about everything. So one of the fruits they eat is ho'ava, which you may know it's a fairly large fruit, kind of like that size, very, very hard. And one of the most impressive things I ever saw was ʻAlalā pick one, and he flew to a perch, and he's holding it with one foot, and he's just using his beak to hammer. And it took him, I don't know, minutes to hammer this thing open. And I thought, man, that guy's going to have a headache. But he thinks it's worth it. I mean, these little oily seeds was what he was after. So these guys work for a living. I mean, these
Right.
birds are not in paradise. They are working hard to survive day in, day out. They got other threats.
Yeah, because I guess my theory behind all of that, my thinking of this is that there's probably a lot of stuff that they used to eat that's not here anymore.
That's exactly right. Or
To
it's,
begin
it's,
with.
it's declined. Yeah, and
mean-
this I think is a real key thing in reintroducing ʻAlalā to the wild. It's like, okay, where are you going to put them?
Right.
And it's like, well, okay, you got to build up the habitat, but that is a very long-term proposition. So, what's interesting about today's effort is you have these birds in captivity. It's very expensive to maintain them in captivity. You got to be building aviaries, and the more successful you are in breeding them in cages, the more cages you need. And at some point, you say, well, we got to get them out in the wild.
Right.
Where are they going to go?
So in where was it? Did it Pu'umaka'ala?
Yeah,
Where
yeah,
they
yeah.
did the
Right.
the release.
Yeah.
Is there native food there?
There is. It's not the.
I mean,
it's
what,
not the
what were they
choicest place.
expecting them to eat? I guess. is
Yeah.
my
Well,
question.
no, it's a fair question. There is fruit. It's not the best. It's not the best stuff that I would say we want this, and this. Pu'umaka'ala area is just barely on the edge of the historical range of ʻAlalā. So, my preference would be habitat that's a little more central to where they were historically, because I think the elements of the habitat are better there. However, I think eventually we'll get there, that the birds will go back to some of these areas. Those areas have to be restored too. I mean, it's like there's no perfect place right now.
Right.
But that should be the goal, is to get some of these other areas that were well within the historical range really good, really good habitat.
And whose job is that?
Well, this is the thing.
That's going to be the land manager, which is
yeah, I mean,
essentially
it's
DLNR.
federal, state, private, whoever
Right, okay.
is willing to have ʻAlalā on their lands. Yeah.
Okay.